morning, 8th grade. It's kind of a spring day outside, so I wore my spring tie. So you got a quiz coming up. The quiz is going to be tomorrow, actually, and it's going to be one question. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. But it's not going to be as easy as you think. So we've been talking about conflict, United States, and so all the way from the Plains Wars right after the Civil War until World War I in 1918. So what you're going to do is you're going to tell me about those years, and you're going to make a narrative to tell me about those years. So narrative, a way of representing or understanding a situation or series of events that reflects and promotes a particular point of view. So, one of my favorite examples for the narrative is the story of the Three Little Pigs. So, was it a big bad wolf, or was it just a neighbor with a cold looking for a cup of sugar? I'll go ahead and put a link at the end of this video so that you can watch the Three Little Pigs, the true story again, if you'd like. So you're going to do a narrative. You're going to do it about the United States in these years of conflict. So I'm going to give you an example of what wouldn't be a narrative, and then two examples of narratives about the same topic. So this is not a narrative. Ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt is split into three kingdoms: Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. Pyramids were built primarily in the Old Kingdom as tombs. Many pharaohs were buried in hidden tombs in the Middle Kingdom. Most New Kingdom pharaohs buried in Valley of Kings. Okay, so what I don't want is you just to give me a list of facts. That's not a narrative. You're just telling me like these are points in history and what happened. The way a narrative works is like this. So ancient Egypt is a land built on slavery. And when you talk about the sort of beginnings of ancient Egypt, you're talking about the pyramids. And so there's some scholarly debate. There's a lot of people now today that say, well, it wasn't actually built by slaves. These giant tombs built for one man were built by farmers during the inundation season when the entire valley was flooded and they couldn't work in their farms. Well, let me ask you a question. Let's say a farmer didn't want to work on the pyramid that year. Could he stay at home and fix his plow, fix his house, hang out with his kids? I mean, probably not, right? I mean, this guy, the Pharaoh, is God, he's king, and you're building him a giant tomb in only 20 years. That means everybody's working on this thing. I mean, we're talking about structures that were the largest structures in the world for 4,300 years. So, I don't buy the fact that it's just, happy farmers going to work on this. I mean, they're slaves, whether they're slaves in name or whether they're made to do this. Then, even in their own hieroglyphs, you show them, they depict themselves, meting out justice to slaves. You can see here in this hieroglyph, one of those cases with their gods watching on. So completely sanctioned, right? Like the whole society is set up to operate on slavery. And then the Shabti that you see in the lower right there, these were servants that were buried with the pharaohs. Well, originally what the pharaohs did is they killed all their servants and had them buried in the tomb with them. Well, as you can imagine, servants weren't very happy about that. So eventually this practice of Shabti came about. I don't know how many Shabti are there, but I'd guess it's 365. So it's a servant for each day in the afterworld. And then our last picture up here is, again, a wall carving from the Egyptians. And it shows people who are clearly of sub-Sahara Africa origin. And that's what they did. The Egyptians would go down every time there's a new pharaoh. They'd invade Kush. They'd steal gold, and they'd take slaves back to become archers in their army. So, ancient Egypt, for all its importance and history, is a country, is a nation that was built upon slavery. All right, so that was a narrative about ancient Egypt, obviously not a positive one, talking about a land built on slavery. So here's another narrative, a different viewpoint of ancient Egypt. So ancient Egypt, a land of tradition and astounding achievement. So as you can see here building the pyramids, you have these farmers who are building the pyramid. There's structures in the background for shade for people who are resting. You see someone here in the foreground that's bringing refreshments back to feed, and I'm sure there's plenty of fresh water to drink. So the idea is that you have these farmers who during inundation, the whole valley is flooded and they can't work on their farms. So, they have this God king who they revere. And so what better way to show your reverence than to build this tomb for him? Seems kind of a foreign idea to us, but, for the times, it certainly made sense. And when they were done, they're pretty spectacular. In that bottom picture there, you can see a representation of what the pyramids were thought to have looked like back in ancient Egypt. There's also some jewelry here, and again, this sense of tradition and doing things the same way and slightly altering them, improving them, and that's why you get some of this gorgeous jewelry from 3,000 years ago. And then in the lower right here, you see a tomb of a pharaoh from the New Kingdom who's Hatshepsut, which, for many, many years, men ruled in any country on the world. And Egypt is one of those few places where there was a woman pharaoh that was in charge. So even though they had their traditions, they also, in some ways, were kind of groundbreaking socially. All right, so that was another narrative, obviously a much more positive narrative talking about ancient Egypt. So your quiz is going to be to talk about this period of conflict in U.S. history from the Plains Wars up through World War I. And all right, down in the comments section, working your way on that picture that said U.S. History Quiz. Starting in the upper left, that's the Plains Wars. And then working in a clockwise direction, you have the U.S.-Philippine War, the Spanish-American War, and World War I. Down in the comments, I want you to put those in chronological order. All right. And you can do that in a bunch of different ways. We talked about was the U.S. An empire. You could say it was or it wasn't, but you could talk about it all from a political standpoint. You could talk about economics. You could talk about how pretty much every one of these wars, the end state was to make money for people in the United States. So you could certainly take that approach. You could talk about social justice, like how the United States treated other people, whether they were technically on U.S. land or whether they were, elsewhere. Like how did the United States government and soldiers treat the people in these places? So that could also fold into like a military narrative as well. So it's really up to you to tell the story, but I don't just want facts. I want you to tell me the story of the United States and these conflicts from the Plains War up through World War I. If you have any questions, go ahead and email me. I'm happy to clarify. We'll run through the quiz on Wednesday, and I'll give you feedback then. And there's the possibility, depending on how this goes, we may do some makeup quizzes at the end. I guess after spring break. All right, well, hope you guys enjoy the day, and I will talk to all of you at your scheduled time tomorrow. Thanks.